Oh, hi everyone. Mature Simmer here. So, just finished up spending a little bit of time. I've been looking at the Case website. Was super excited just because of my new surroundings. Not in an escape room, as much as this might look like something like that. There is a way out of here. It's down the steps here, but I'm in my new office. So I'm over here in Green Valley, Nebraska, and this is one of our sheds. You can see we've got a large Demco auger wagon here and a couple large Case tractors, 620 and 400 series, and nice red trucks, so you can start to understand this is a red farm. Red buildings, red equipment for the most part. A lot of red. So, for those of you who may not have looked at the preview, just a brief explanation of what I'm doing here so that you understand what the context of this series is going to be, or is going to try to be. As I said in the preview, this is an experimental series in that I've made some changes to the VIP Order Manager mod to hopefully make it work, in this case, with a 4X map. The way the changes work, the way my testing worked, I think if I want to use different scales, so I may do this with bigger maps. I don't really know, because there's going to be plenty of automation on this map. Just because of time, I'm probably not going to do a lot of things myself. I'll have Courseplay and things like that operating in the background to keep things moving along, but that would just be increased on bigger maps. So Green Valley's a 4X map if you're not familiar with it. You know, there's been a few changes made to the farm just to accommodate what my expectations are, and frankly jobs I don't like to do or like to do. I mean, at the end of the day, I've got to enjoy what I'm doing to make some enjoyable videos for you. So, but because of that, I don't know how long it's going to take to progress on things. I don't know how difficult it's going to be to move along, and this may turn into a big flop. I don't know. But in the interim, I'm going to give it a go. The premise is, investors and myself went ahead and bought this farm in Green Valley from others who had owned it before. You can see we've got cows out in the field. So this isn't an empty farm. Things are going on. There's some supplies that came with it and so forth, just to make things manageable. But at this point, my first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to get some crops into the 2 fields that come with this farm, which on this map are fields 8 and 9. So I'm going to get my seeder / planter. I've got something new to me for certain. I've never used the Estrella 32 that I have, but having come upon it, seeing its capabilities, I felt it would be perfect for this series, because it can do everything I need and then some. Basically, it can plant everything. It's a direct drill, which is going to be important because there's going to be enough work here without having to do additional fertilization and so forth. I'm still obviously going to have to put lime on the field and so forth, so we'll do that as well, but I want crops to start growing as quickly as possible. The other thing I'm probably going to do is I just may bounce around, and these may be short episodes, you know, that aren't like a lot of the time-lapse series that people do, but may just jump from one thing to another pretty quickly, where I'll show a few minutes of something, and then I'll show a few minutes of the next thing, and we'll go from there. So this thing is a little tricky to fill. Alright, I'm hoping I'm in the right place. There we go. Get the seeds. But the way this mod is built, things are off the edge a bit. So, for whatever reason, the seeds are filled off the sides. The fertilizer's filled over what appear to be the seed bins. So, design that I would probably suggest should be different, but I'm not that familiar with playing with mods. I've done some things. As I said, I've modified the VIP order manager, but that took many hours of doing to figure out how to do that. I've spent several more hours trying to figure out how I change the trigger points or whatever, and just came up short. So before we get going here, I'm going to take a look at what we've got. So here's our map. You can see we've got these two fields, 8 and 9. So 8's 26 hectares, 9 is 24. Obviously 9 also has got a lot of extra space. So in theory, this is my better field, even in production, because you can see my silty clay and so forth. So I've got my soil map information for each of these fields. So as part of our purchase, we went ahead and bought the soil maps so that we could go ahead and operate with those. The things that we're driving this series on are these VIP orders. So the changes that were made the orders fit more with large maps like this, where I'm going to get a lot of production out. So initially the way the mod was built was for smaller maps, and so the first level, for example, would need like under 10,000 liters of something, which is really nothing on a large map like this. So it was those kind of adjustments, and then also trying to make sure that it worked going out, that I did. Not perfect. I'm not going to claim it is by any stretch of the imagination. Some may question, the large payout here in level 2, for example, but there's a lot of work involved here. 609,000 liters of grass, 36,000 liters of hay, basically 1 million liters of grass work. Nothing to sneeze at. Waiting for a lot of milk and so forth, and eggs, so it seems okay. So the mix I came up with seemed to work. So that's what I'm going with. So that's what you're in for if you're going to follow along here. And we're going to see how things go as we go along. But in any event, going back here, I'm looking for barley and I'm looking for canola. So given that I need more barley than canola, logically, I guess that means my bigger field should be barley. My smaller field should be canola. I'm probably going to get more than enough in either case, given that this is an early order, but when we start getting up there in other levels, things might change. Alright, so I've got this set for canola. I'm going to go ahead and get this folded out here. Get started. Alright, so at this point, as I said, this is a direct seeder. So I'm going to go ahead, run a couple headlands around the field here to the best of my ability. Obviously, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's a bit of a challenge there, that's for certain. Alright, so I've made some adjustments in my operation. Again, I'm new to this planter. I'm trying to find a way to maybe get a little bit better coverage. And that may or may not work, but... So I've gone ahead and changed out the tractor here because I've gone ahead and forgotten I had a crop sensor to put on this tractor here, and this tractor is large enough to work this implement. So now one of the challenges we're going to have is it's going to go a little slower with the crop sensor. So the nice thing with this planter is it would go 11 on its own, but I think it's going to go a little bit slower because of the crop sensor. So in the little bit of work I did without the crop sensor, I noticed we got up to speed. Well, now we're actually moving along. So it might simply be because of that little uphill climb. So, the nice thing here is we'll get around the field, we'll get what we need, and, some of the decisions I need to make as I've gone ahead and decided how I'm going to work this is, as I said, I want to make things enjoyable, but yet a little bit reasonable. So I don't have fieldstone, for example, operating, but I do have weeds, because so we are going to have to deal with those, because I think that would be realistic, especially on really large farms like this. But also, I'm not having to do some of the other things that might be things to be concerned about. We're not going to worry about seasons, for example. We're just going to try to get the work done. So part of the thing with the mod and the changes I made was trying to understand the example of what we've got going on, where you can see we started with 500,000, but now I'm below that. The reason for that is the cows are consuming water from the public water supply, and we get charged for that every hour. So there are costs with operating this farm, even if theoretically nothing's happening. And what I think we're going to start to see very quickly is that it's going to take days in Farming Simulator, that means months, to make progress. And in the meantime, we're going to have expenses that are coming in, which is why it seemed reasonable with the settings and the payouts that I was seeing with the changes to be getting the kind of bonus levels we're talking about, because that makes this work where I'm doing things specifically for a given client, and might have instead chosen to do something that was less costly, workable. So the other thing, and the other reason I like this map is, this is out here. You can see we've got some mountains. The map author put this out in what they said is western Nebraska, which gets us closer to the Rocky Mountains. And so we start to see that type of terrain here. Yeah, the cedar definitely has a lot more moving parts, I think, than a lot of other ones. At least it is generating a lot more movement than I'm used to. Maybe this field's bumpier than most too, which is not bad. So yeah, as I get here near the edge, gonna want to make sure I get a good coverage there. So we'll go ahead and just make sure that that runs over. Alright, got that lined up. We're heading out again to get this end. We'll see what the edge of the field starts to look like once we get all the way around. Obviously, started a little bit north of the bins, but obviously then changed tractors. But a pretty exciting start to what should be a very interesting series as I work through this. I think I'm definitely intrigued. I really enjoy the VIP order manager. The challenge is really going to be, can I make enough to turn this into a resoundingly successful operation as I go along, because as you can see, I've not made one headland yet, and I'm almost 50% of my fertilizer. Now again, this isn't a huge planter, but once again, to get something that's direct seeding, and I really didn't feel like the fields warranted a seed hawk or something like that. This isn't that large of a set of fields. Over time, maybe I'll get to that. But it was also just the physical space that I have on the farm to do things. Certainly of interest and intrigue is that field there, being that it's near the farm and it's pretty large. That may be something I go to eventually. Not sure, but definitely is nice that we've got some different shapes and options here. So now we're heading over, other than perhaps we'll hit areas that got missed, so maybe a leader or two will pop out here. And I didn't have the crop sensor up here, so you can see there is a little bit of fertilization being dropped in here, 5 or 10 kilograms per hectare. So we are seeing that number go down a bit. I think we'll get through these. So that worked out okay before it moves over to the second headland. And, you know, it's really just going to be more the challenge of how involved will it be. It's interesting that we're not getting a lot of fertilizer when I'm turning. I don't know if that's the sensor popping over or feeling things a certain way, because now we're way up there again, like we were down here in the dark red area. The first time running through with precision farming, I've also found it's a little bit of a challenge in consumption, because obviously you're going from a completely depleted field in many cases to something else. So again, as we're turning to the left, it seems to shrink down a bit, but then obviously we'll be heading to the right again as I continue on. So I'm going to keep seeding this field in canola, and I'll get you up to date of what happened when I'm done, and then we'll move on to the other field. I'm hoping I have enough time today to do both. If I don't, then it will become the next day's job, and then maybe I do weed and liming, or maybe that other field just takes longer, because I'm not sure with weeding and liming how long everything's going to take either. So maybe these fields are a bit bigger than I thought, but out here in Nebraska, where we've got wide open spaces, sometimes it's hard to tell. I'll see you in a bit. Alright, so I'm finally complete with the first field. I'm going to go ahead and at least kick off the next one. It is 7:40, but I do want to try to at least start going, so I'm switched over to barley. And we're going to go ahead and get this moving. I think barley uses seeds faster. But it may not. I'm not entirely sure. But at this point, I'm going to get this going. I'm going to end up finishing it the next day. So that means whatever I get done. Now again, it may take me all day next day to do this, depending how late I go, because I don't think I'm going to go too terribly late. But then I will, of course, pick things up. You can see kind of the size and scope of this field. We know it's a little bit bigger than the other one. We've got the bridge out there. We've got some cell points. I believe might be some productions out there as well. So all of these things will come to light over time as our VIPs need different things, and I'll continue working in the space as makes sense as far as getting around Green Valley here and moving around. But at this point, I think I've got enough to get you to understand what I'm doing and how involved this is going to be, because it's pretty substantial, as you can see. I've got a lot of work here, and this is just the level 1 VIP orders. So I'll see you next time.